And it's just so wrapped up in everything that we do. So one of my, main goals is to, just create some awareness around, why. Why are you going to alcohol? And really, journaling, like you guys have always talked about, actually writing about some of these experiences and, things that you are seeing in society, even, and your own alcohol use. And it's kind of eye-opening.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast. I'm Stephanie May Potter, and I'm here with my co-host, Marnie Dotches-Marmette.
We created the Art of Living Well podcast to empower you to live your happiest, healthiest, and most authentic life. Each week, we will bring you inspiring and motivating conversations covering health and wellness topics, including fitness, mindset, food, travel, product reviews, and strategies from a variety of experts, including our own bank of knowledge.
We are excited to educate, motivate, and inspire you to change the way you perceive health and discover your art of living well. Get ready to feel inspired. Hello and welcome to episode 139 of the Art of Living Well podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, we have a couple of quick announcements. It's fall, and you know what that means. It's time for our next quarterly functional medicine liver detox. And we've both had an amazing summer. The weather has been gorgeous in Minnesota, and Marnie and I have definitely loved all of our barbecues and summer gatherings with friends and family, and overall break from our routines. But we both need a reset. I know in talking to some of you guys that you do as well. So for those parents out there, your kids by now are hopefully back in school and you're starting to fall back into your own routine and focusing on those healthy habits. And this is just the perfect time to reset those healthy habits that you were already doing, but maybe just got a little bit off track this summer. It's a great time to reset your liver and get ready for an amazing last quarter of 2022. So we'd love for you to join us for this liver detox where you're going to boost your immunity, reduce your toxic load, decrease your bloating, you're going to increase your energy, improve your digestion in just 1 week. And what this community program really does is it helps you learn to tune into your body's unique needs and walk away with a set of tools and a better understanding of your own body. Plus, you will feel so proud of yourself for this accomplishment. We're starting on Sunday, September 19th. But if that timing doesn't work for you, you can really start whenever you'd like. Marnie and I will support you throughout your journey. So click the link in the show notes, message us with any questions. We would love to have you join our supportive community. And then finally, we've had a couple of these health transformation audits that we've dropped over the last few months. And it's just a 15-minute short episode where we bring you, our community members, on to help you identify what's holding you back from your ideal health and wellness. And then together we analyze those challenges with you so that you can walk away with one tangible action step to guide you on your journey to finding your art of living well. We absolutely love doing these episodes as integrative health practitioners and health coaches. So click the link in the show notes, email us at theartoflivingwellpodcast@gmail.com and sign up for your 15-minute health transformation audit today. And now let's welcome today's amazing guest, Jen Gilhoi. Jen is an event experience strategist and founder of Sparktrack.com, where she's been focusing on event experiences, the follow-up, and strategic story writing for a decade. In her life and work, she is fascinated with the art of gathering and intentional conversations. She especially loves lingering behind and reliving moments others have long since moved on from. It's in her DNA. In 2014, Jen moved on from active addiction and began a sober lifestyle. As an introvert and moderate empath, she discovered that the written word is her avenue to invite others into inquiry and shatter stigmas around addiction. In 2021, Jen launched her personal brand, JenGilhoi.com, to focus on shifting the narrative around sobriety to sober, not somber. Jen invites self and social inquiry into alcohol use and shatters stigmas through her writing, conversations, and inclusive events. Her work in the sober space is not about self-help and peer-to-peer support. Rather, it's about creating healthier environments that support a wide range of sober choices. Jen is also a board member of Dissonance, an organization that promotes mental health and recovery in and through the arts, which she talks about in today's episode. Jen is on a mission to normalize not drinking and to bring conversations around alcohol-free workplaces and alcohol-free happy hours to corporate events. This is such a powerful and relevant conversation, talking about how we as a society can normalize choosing not to drink and how to become sober curious, even if you do choose to drink alcohol. Jen invites you to engage in healthy self and social inquiry to heal and be well. In today's conversation, Jen shares her 3 pillars to becoming sober, which include working with yourself, working with your peers, and working with your environment. We talk about how you can explore your relationship with alcohol, how you can sit with your uncomfortableness and experiment in small doses. Did you know that more than half of Americans say they'd like to drink less or not at all? Contrary to past notions, you don't have to be an alcoholic to choose not to drink. And we dive into this topic today. Jen talks about the mindset shift that needs to occur to be able to overcome FOMO, or the fear of missing out, and the misconception that you have to drink in order to be fun. Jen really opens up and becomes vulnerable about her journey to becoming sober and how living a non-alcoholic life has really improved her well-being over the last 8 years in all areas of her life. We dive in and talk about ways to have conversations with your teen about alcohol use and how, as parents, we can model good behavior. And she shares lots of resources and ways that she unwinds and relaxes without alcohol. So without further ado, let's jump right into our conversation with Jen Gilhoy.
But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Shield Your Body. Shield Your Body is a company that makes products to shield your body against electromagnetic frequency, or EMF radiation, from modern technology. Did you know that all modern technology is a source of EMF radiation? Cell phones, laptops, Wi-Fi, even your refrigerator is a source of EMF radiation. And each year, we are exposed to more and more EMFs.
There are literally thousands of high-quality, peer-reviewed scientific studies demonstrating clear links between exposure to EMF radiation and a wide range of negative health effects, from anxiety and infertility to sleep disruption and cancer. Fortunately, there are easy ways that you can reduce your EMF exposure right now that cost you absolutely nothing. After reading the Shield Your Body guide, I stopped using my AirPods, something I used daily for hours sometimes, and have switched back to the old school wired headphones.
And for me, after reading the Shield Your Body guide, I really put my foot down and insisted that my kids keep their cell phones and their laptops out of their bedrooms at night while they were sleeping. And I've been working on Jordan as well. And I think after reading the guide and listening to our podcast, he has finally agreed to do that. So download your copy of a free guide at shieldyourbody.com to start improving your health right now.
And be sure to check out our episode number 123 with our Blank, CEO of Shield Your Body.
Hi, Jen. We are so excited to have you on the show today. Stephanie and I both met you through Modern Well, our women's, or I guess community co-working space that we all work out of. And we've known you now for a number of years, and it's been really fun to get to know you. And I know we all went to like a little dance party together a few years ago, and that was super fun. And Stephanie and I have been chatting for a while now about having you come on our podcast to talk about normalizing not drinking and living a more sober lifestyle. And I think it's such an important topic, and we're just really excited to dive deeper into that with you today. And before we really dive in, I know that everyone has a story, and we would love to hear in a nutshell your journey on how you came to live a sober life and build your career around this, in addition to the work you do with Sparktrack Consulting, and how it has changed your path over time from when you first started in your business.
Yeah, first of all, thank you both so much for having me on. I know our conversations over, at Modern Well over the years have really meant a lot to me, and I'm just excited to be here. So, yeah, getting into story. So, approaching a milestone birthday coming up on 50 years, I really have, over 2 decades worth of, experience with alcohol use and some years of sobriety now, 8 years. And what is so fascinating to me is I thought I was managing my alcohol consumption. It started in high school, it progressed in college, as you know, with this disease, which some label as alcoholism. It is really cunning and baffling and powerful. So, in my career, in my early days, I was part of events and was around alcohol all the time. And even if I wanted to get away from it, I found it really hard to do. I did know very early on in my 20s that I had a problem with drinking. But it took me 2 decades really to step into the rooms of AA and actually get help. I could not do it alone. So, fast forward to around my 40th birthday, I had a career in marketing and advertising and had just accepted a job where I experienced a lot of stress and burnout. And at that birthday, I really came to realize that I needed to remove alcohol from my life. And it's not an easy thing for sure. It took me a good 2 years with a couple relapses to actually understand and be able to make sobriety a sustainable and long term piece of my life. So I definitely have done that over the last 8 years. And I would say more in the last 4 years, become much more vocal and stepped into my purpose, which is really, I think, helping others and being very open about what it takes to become sober.
Well,
Wow.
congratulations, first of all, on being sober for 8 years. That's
Thank
wonderful,
you.
and we're proud of you.
Yeah, and thank
Thank
you for
you.
sharing that story. And I think, like you said, you're now stepping into your purpose as far as being more open and sharing your journey and to help others. And that's what we really want to dive in today and
Yeah.
talk about. So can you tell us a little bit about how you explored your relationship with alcohol? You kind of mentioned that, you had a couple of relapses, and it was
Mhm.
obviously, it was a journey in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the beginning, even though I was, going to AA meetings, trying to build a community with people that were, had some amount of long term sobriety built up, it still became a challenge when I would go back into my workplace or be out in social settings where I just felt like I was always missing out. Like I was still kind of romanticizing about this life and relationship I had with alcohol, which it really took some, deep work on myself to let go of that. And those were, a couple relapses I had at like 4 months and 5 months before I actually, figured it out. I have had enough tools in my toolbox, as we say, to know what to do to stay sober and know that once I go down a certain path, I don't really have an off switch to drinking, and I think you can tell yourself that you do. And sometimes I did. Sometimes I'd be able to have a couple drinks and be fine. But overall, it was just a very unhealthy pattern for me. And I needed to realize that. I really needed to hit my own kind of rock bottom before I actually was able to get help for myself.
So how does someone go about changing their relationship with alcohol? So you came to a point where you realized it wasn't, you couldn't control it in the way that, some people or how it's perceived by some that they can control their alcohol, I guess. Um, if you're just thinking that to our listeners out there who can maybe are really resonating with what you have to say and their own personal experience with alcohol, how does someone go about that? It's really a behavior change. It's a habit, but like you said, it's all around you. And that's what seems to be so
Yeah.
challenging. It's a social norm. It's,
Absolutely. So I think of it in terms of like three pillars. There's this like work on self, and then there's work with your peers and in a community to have support. And then there's this third level of environment. Like, how does your environment support your drive and your, goal to be sober? And that's exactly where my work is in that environmental space, because that's where I see over and over again. We do the work, we go to the rooms, people in recovery are at meetings and talking with each other. But our society just reflects that we should be able to drink responsibly. And I think when I look back at my alcohol abuse, it really is, centered in those spaces where I would go and join with friends, and that, drinks are flowing and you're just like, why can't I do this like everyone else? And it becomes this, barrier, I guess, to social experiences. So I definitely found that there were layers. And if I look back, the first year was really work on myself and through AA and with community. And I really didn't get to this kind of understanding of how the environment around us impacts us until about 4 years. And that's when I started becoming much more vocal about the need to kind of, to address what's happening in our social spaces and support people that want to make better choices for whatever reason, really.
So, as you became sober, did you find yourself pulling away from those social situations or environmental situations that you were in the past where you felt like you wanted to drink and be with friends and whatever, and then the new sober Jen, I would think, would have a hard time putting yourself in those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talked about this before, but really the first year, I didn't do anything. Like, I was like reading books. I was at home, what they call white knuckling, right? Until you profoundly understand like this sober life, which now I feel I'm one of the luckiest, as Laura McCown says. It really truly, in the beginning it takes a while for your brain to kind of understand that you have to form new patterns and new habits. So literally kind of went underground for a year, started, when I would go into some of those spaces, go with community, go with someone who had my back and kind of understood that those situations were just hard, and I still to this day experience some of those feelings and some of those barriers just in social settings, like really quite often, which is surprising. So again, that's, part of the journey. And I think there's this perception that, once you get sober, like everything changes. And it literally is such a deep and time-consuming transformation that relapse is it's almost part of everyone's journey. I know very few people who can just walk away from it and make all the changes that need to happen in order to have sustainable sobriety.
Yeah, and what based on your experience and what you've seen with others, why do you think that is? I mean, is it because there's such a social aspect to alcohol?
Yeah, there's that. There's, internally, we call it like playing the tape, like the idea of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So, that was one of the first things I learned, play the tape, because I had 20 years of experience. Like, why couldn't I see that having a drink at an event and going to a happy hour and all of these things would lead to a blackout drunk? It would lead to, consequences that were horrifying and terrible, for my family. And why wasn't that enough? It was really powerful to keep going through the kind of insanity piece, and not realizing that you needed to do drastic things to interrupt that.
Which I think is common, right? People, it's hard to break patterns and habits.
Yeah.
It really takes a mindful, conscious decision to move forward in a different way and continue to do it over and over again until you have broken that pattern.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the marathon, right? You don't just get up and say, I'm going to run a marathon the next day. There's training involved, there's the daily work, and it's small incremental change that you have to keep working on. And a lot of the, AA and the things that I did in the beginning were like, I don't really believe this, but I'm saying it. I'm reciting the 12 steps, which, the first one is to admit you're powerless over alcohol. And that's another piece that I want to share with your listeners too, is that, AA has been absolutely wonderful for me and so many, but in particular for women, one of the first things you had to say is, you're powerless, which didn't resonate with me because I, for the first time, actually felt pretty powerful, like seeking help. I felt like I'm going to take charge of this. I want to step into that. And, I think the other piece of it is you have to basically say you have character flaws. So, it kind of implies that you as a person have these terrible character defects when in reality, it's just the nature of how we are as humans, right? So I had to do a lot of work to just kind of walk through that process that was laid out by so many alcoholics in recovery before me. I had to really take what worked for me and leave some of the other things that didn't resonate as well. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that, like I'm not, and AA does a really nice job of saying whatever your higher power is. But, it was founded by, white men who, I don't know, it's just a very different story that many women bring into it. And the book itself, Alcoholics Anonymous, has stories woven into it, which I actually think is wonderful. If it was just a 12-step with no personal experience, I think it would be hard to relate to. So for that reason, it really is a wonderful piece to just dive into and just be as open as you possibly can. If something doesn't work, exactly for you, not setting it aside, but just kind of sitting with it, like, and figuring out what you're going to do with that information.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, really in any sort of anything that a person follows, right? It's good to take what you need out of it. I mean,
Right.
I think about religion that way. I know not everybody does, but I do. Like whatever resonates with me and works for me is what I take out of it. And I take things from all different religions. There's not just one that I like and all believing in. So it's similar, right? Not religion, but just that you're taking what you need from it. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think, this was 10 years ago when I first tried to get sober. Really, it was AA. And people weren't talking about it in the workplace. There wasn't a mental health conversation. None of these things were happening. And so, throughout the pandemic and over the last probably 3 some years, incredible, in fact, more women writers that I've connected with have shared their sober journey and opened up the doors for all of us to just talk more about it. So I feel like even now, if people picked up one of these books, Quit Like a Woman, which is my favorite, by Holly Whitaker, or if you read Laura McCown's We Are the Luckiest, you could join virtual groups and get support from a very like-minded community. And that's how a lot of people are exploring and getting into the idea and just exploring their relationship with alcohol. And I just don't feel like, 10 years ago, there was nothing like that. There, was huge shame and stigma around it, which is, what really kept me from doing anything. It was paralyzing. I mean, it's like you don't want your life to be, in the workplace and have all of these horrible experiences, but you just don't know a way out. No one's modeled it for you or talked about it.
Well, and that's a great transition into what you're doing now. And I'm wondering if we can talk about that. You don't have to be an alcoholic to choose not to drink. And you can really choose for whatever reason at any time if you don't want to drink. But can you talk about your work in the sober space and how you're focused on improving social experiences that take the focus away from alcohol and the expectations and pressures around drinking and really focus on the idea that to be fun and to have fun, you don't have to be drinking or intoxicated.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so in August of 2021, this had been on my heart for quite some time, but I did launch my personal brand, which is jengilhoi.com. And that's where I started sharing stories more about my social experiences around the question that I would get everywhere, which is, why aren't you drinking? And even if it wasn't verbally asked to me at a restaurant, bar, or an event where everyone has a drink in hand, it was questioned. It was just awkward, or there's just all these weird things about how do you respond to that, and why are people asking that? I would like to say, why are you drinking? But the social norms just, it just dictates our experience everywhere. So I just became really passionate about asking these questions in these spaces and finding out, what are people, even those that, are what I would call sober curious. And what is a resounding kind of coming back to me is that that's potentially 80% of the population, that sometimes may not want to drink and still gets the question, or comes into a social experience thinking, oh, I think, I just worked out and I'm, have something tomorrow. I'm going to, not drink tonight when we go to this restaurant. The minute you walk in the door, it's presented to you with a menu and, here's our wine and, the whole thing. And you're just like, I guess I should have something. I mean, it's just so inherent in the process. So you look at how it pairs with even people that are choosing more, to have more wellness in their life. And then this is also part of wrapped up in that experience. And I have just found that the door is wide open, with Ruby Warrington's naming of Sober Curious. It is just like that gray area drinking spectrum is just wide open. Like half of the American population says, I'd like to drink less or not at all, So it is a thing. And I think by just really talking about our social spaces, not necessarily saying, no alcohol whatsoever, but kind of this idea of most of us haven't had some experiences in, like, from weddings and, baby showers, all the things we do that have alcohol present. We haven't had enough of those experiences without alcohol to even know.
I love what you're doing. I think this is so important. I know we've talked about it. I remember when you first kind of started, even just like the New Year's Eve experience with,
Yes.
some places locally in the Twin Cities where you were trying to have like a party that didn't have alcohol. And I think Marnie and I can both relate a lot to this sober curious, because there's periods of time where that we choose not to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even for someone, I do drink alcohol, but there are many, many times, and particularly I have to say around my kids' sporting events, which is interesting. It's a whole nother area we could get, where parents are drinking before games and, a Tuesday night, a Monday night. It's not just like I choose to like have nice dinners with wine and things like that, but it's just becoming like a little out of control, I have to say. And so it's not just in like a party situation, it's like in every night of the week. And I think you probably can speak to this, like during COVID, those numbers ramped up even more because we were home and we weren't having to drive. And there's a lot of people that came out of like a year or two into the pandemic just wanting to drink less. And, really, I've had a lot of people say that to me. I was drinking a lot and I don't want to drink so much anymore. And how can I limit it? Do I really need a glass of wine every night? And those are people that are still I'll use that in quotes, controlling their alcohol to a certain extent and haven't hit a place where they've realized that alcohol has the power over them. So,
well, and yes, I'll say also in reference to that, like I do also, like Stephanie, I enjoy a nice glass of wine with some good food, but I'm not a huge drinker. I've shared with you guys, my dad is recovering alcoholic addict and has been sober for 30 plus years, or I don't know how many years, but a lot of years now. So I've always been super conscious of not going down that road myself. However, I do really enjoy a good cocktail or a good glass of wine in small doses. But I will say, like Stephanie, I've noticed that the alcohol use in my age group, our age group, has skyrocketed. And I don't remember it being like this when I was little with babies, the way it is now. And maybe it was, and it just wasn't on my radar. But it's really kind of unbelievable to me, and especially when we think about how alcohol is a depressant. And there are so many people walking around with mental health issues and depression. And then you throw alcohol on top of that just makes it worse, right?
Yeah, it's a toxic mix. And certainly through the pandemic, people have, when you can kind of put your Zoom screen on mute and grab a glass of wine, like I've literally heard women talking about that. And I think what it comes down to is, you really recognize how you pair your alcohol use. So, okay, nice dinner, and you kind of, you have certain things that you do, sporting events with kids. Oh, we need this. It's hardly even questioned. So I think the big piece there is becoming aware. So even if you're a, normal, or if you feel like you're a responsible drinker, it's still good to question, why are we doing this? And the other piece that was huge for me is my alcohol use was actually driven by like fun events, or, times in my life where I was like celebrating, or it was a reward. And, a reward for making it to the end of the workday. And it's just so wrapped up in everything that we do. So one of my, main goals is to, just create some awareness around, why. Why are you going to alcohol? And really, journaling, like you guys have always talked about, actually writing about some of these experiences and, things that you are seeing in society even, and your own alcohol use. And it's kind of eye-opening with even just the groups of women I've talked to. It's like, oh yeah, we don't even have a non-alcoholic option at, this wedding that I'm hosting for my daughter. It's not even on the menu. We have 80 wines to choose from, but, nothing for the non-alcoholic crowd. So a lot of space to make improvements there.
So how do you create the non-alcoholic experience? And you said something earlier about feel like the FOMO, your fear of missing out, we associate alcohol with being fun. And so if I'm not drinking, I'm not going to be fun.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
that to me is a huge mindset shift that needs to happen.
I know. And believe me, right in early sobriety, I was not fun at a bar. I was like white knuckling it, like just don't drink. So, And I would say in that space, the perception is that, if a bar or restaurant is offering like sparkling water, soda as like, let's say, as their non-alcoholic options, and they have that on the menu, it is a miss. So there's so much in terms of the experience and the celebrated way a non-alcoholic beverage is presented. There's just a lot. I mean, there's so much that we can change in that space, because even if you do have something served to you, oftentimes I find, it's like a kiddie cocktail, or it has a different glass than everyone else's. And it's just painful to experience a lot of these things still, and not have the awareness from the event host or whomever is really kind of in charge of that social space.
I think that's a good point to bring across, because I'm thinking that a lot of people don't think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And even, what I have noticed as well is, oftentimes if I am not drinking, I might be the only one in a bar or restaurant that is not, doesn't have an alcoholic beverage in hand. The huge difference that I've noticed is now that I have a community of people that choose not to drink, when we go out, if there's 8 or 10 of us, it totally changes the dynamic of the experience. And so when everyone is not drinking, everyone is present at the same level. You can have really awesome conversation, people, like dancing, right? Like some of these activities, like we joke about karaoke, like who's going to do karaoke without a couple beverages in them, And so like, that's what I want to create in some of these social experiences is, not just a few NA options, but really celebrating the fact that everyone in an adult, entertainment venue could actually be not drinking. Like, what would that look like?
Yeah,
It'd be amazing.
I love that. It would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're lucky, at least in Minneapolis, there are a lot of restaurants that have amazing non-alcoholic beverages. I've had them.
Me too.
Like I've chosen to have them. If I'm only going to have one or two drinks, maybe I'll have that and a glass of wine. And they're really good. There's some really creative things to do. And there's even some like non-alcoholic, I don't want to call them like gin or vodka, right? But I've seen lots of ads pop up on my Instagram feed. I don't know how those are, but
for sure. There's such an interesting space there. So really when I talk to those non-alcoholic beverage makers, they aren't necessarily targeting those in recovery. Because sometimes, and I have found this, like you'll go to AA and they'd be like, completely stay away from the unalcoholic beverages. Like, especially if it is a drink that is very similar to your favorite alcoholic drink. So in my first probably 3 years, of sobriety, I did not touch any version of NA, anything that looked like it. And I think that's an important message to also share is that we need to just be aware that, creating these amazing cocktails that mimic your favorite drink, like a Manhattan or, a beer, for some may be even too close to jeopardizing their, any amount of sobriety that they've accumulated. So it's like, there's like many layers to it, but it is interesting and that's why I talk about like that 80%, of the population who just, that's where the experience starts. And if that starts to happen, those in recovery can step into those spaces and, also be a part of that. So that's exciting to me.
What is your favorite non-alcoholic drink?
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's so many great makers. Right now I'm really liking Ritual Proof. They have a non-alcoholic tequila. And, the other thing, you think about all of the senses wrapped up with, like, let's say you're, putting your hand around your favorite drink and you're about ready to take, your first sip. There's a sensory experience. There's smell, there's taste. And what I haven't found in several NA beverages is what I found in this Ritual Proof tequila, which is a heat. Like if you were to take a drink of something alcoholic, it gives you the illusion of this warming, burning sense. And some people it's really like a trigger or an association. And I have found with this tequila, because of all the ingredients, agave and everything, that there's actually a heat to it. Which was fascinating. I'm like, oh, that could be dangerous, but no. So far, it's just amazing what you don't even miss. It's like if we can have these experiences and have fantastic non-alcoholic cocktails, which also means no sugar. That's like the biggest thing that most people, when even the term mocktails, we want to kind of strip from the language because it does implies, well, I'm mimicking something I can't have. So we really do say non-alcoholic beverage right now, have a lot of different language and terms going around for that. But that's one I love. And then also I really am impressed with ABV Technologies locally here in St. Paul, Minnesota, where breweries from around the area will choose one of their favorite brews and send it to their location. And Ben there literally takes the alcohol out of the brew and sends it back to the brewery. And it's even on tap. Bauhaus is a great place to get five different NA beers on tap.
Where? Baja House?
Bauhaus, yeah.
Oh, Bauhaus.
On Broadway, yeah. Yep. Bauhaus. But yeah, there's, and I think that's where it starts. It has to start with people that are, in these spaces that understand that, people want healthier options. I talk to so many that might want to start their evening with a couple alcoholic drinks, and then they want to switch over to something non-alcoholic so they can be productive and, not drive drunk. I mean, I can't tell you like that, how many times, that has happened for me, but also just listening to a group of men recently talk. I mean, it's just like so common. So what if we could start making an impact in some of our social spaces that improved all of that? I mean, I just think, wow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, Jen, how has living a non alcoholic lifestyle for you? How has it improved your life overall and just changed how you see the world?
Yeah, I would say during active alcohol abuse, it kept me very small. I just never felt like enough. I would have ideas, and I feel like I'm a creative person. And I feel like, if I would have one night that, something happened as a consequence or something from that, it would derail me for weeks getting back on track. And I just don't, I felt like I wasn't living my fullest life to my fullest potential whatsoever. So since becoming full, 8 years ago, stepping into sobriety, wow, I've started to use that experience to kind of work on all different areas of my life. And it spirals. But that is like the base level of, if I was drinking, I was not going to have these things in my life. I consider myself what I call sober necessary. For me, it's a life or death situation. If I were to drink again and have too much, and I never, know when that could happen, and others are maybe still on the more curious spectrum, but yeah, definitely a necessary thing for me.
So I know that many people out there use alcohol to like relax, unwind, maybe feel more comfortable in a social setting. How do you relax and unwind? And have you noticed in social situations, as a woman who is not drinking, like, do you get annoyed, or, and maybe annoyed isn't the right word, but like, and I don't
Yeah.
want to say judgmental, but like, feel like, okay, here I am sober, surrounded by all these drunk, drunk people. Like, how is that for you?
Oh, yes. Okay. So the first part of the question, how do I unwind and relax? Sauna is like my favorite thing. I started doing that 3 years ago. And what I love about it is you come into this hot sauna, no one has a drink. I mean, you have water outside, but it's never even a question. And it's a social experience that I absolutely love and feel completely comfortable in. And then the other part of that is, I don't go to some of those things that I know are going to be overly, heavy into drinking, all the things that I just set a boundary, just not doing that. So to the second part of the question, yes, I mean, it's hard to say it's not annoying to be sober and be around drunk people. It really is hard. I have to tap into my empathy, and oh my gosh, I that was me. The annoying drunk person who was trying to, corral everyone, make sure everybody was drinking and happy and dancing. So I have lived that. So I have to remember that in terms of the judgmental piece. And I can't even tell you, talking with women like you who share, that they are and they do that, with wine with dinner. And I just had this amazing girls trip with 15 women. And I always ask, is the drinking going to be a focus? And the host assured me it would not be. And it wasn't. There were dinners, and, women had wine, and it felt good to like be in a situation like that where people I felt were using it in a celebratory way. And I think you should be able to do that. I mean, for sure, if I didn't have this train wreck of consequences, I would want that for me, you know? And so I think that is really like the divide in society, especially if you're AA and all the way over here. There for sure is that judgy, of what we call normies. But gosh, bringing that together and having conversations and remembering what our history, as people who have maybe abused alcohol too much in the past, where we were, and staying in that space so we can open up conversations with people who are like, well, I think I'm okay. I have that all the time. I have conversations with people, I don't know, do I have a drinking problem? And that's what people want to know, right? Take a quiz, determine if I am, or, am I okay? Yeah.
And then there's people that don't care. Like they're not willing to give up the alcohol. Like,
Right. Right.
Yes, I may have a drinking problem, but
Yes.
I don't care. I'm going to have
I
my
don't
drinking
care.
problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes me sad. Yeah, and again, this is the work in the environmental space, going after big alcohol. I mean, right now you look at a label and it just says, if you're pregnant, maybe breastfeeding, operating like heavy machinery, it's maybe not good for you. I mean, we need to change the language on the labels. It's, alcohol and drugs are listed kind of separately, like alcohol and drug abuse, when alcohol is a highly addictive drug. And we're all sold the idea that you should be able to drink responsibly, which is not the case. And it's not the case for a lot of people. Yeah.
I agree. And, we, a couple of things we want to dive into, but we interviewed someone, the episode hasn't dropped, talking about magic mushrooms, right? And microdosing. And, that's illegal in a lot of states. I think it's moving in the direction. I think there's only one or two states in the US where it is legal, but you can drink 2 bottles of wine and be fine, quote, fine, right?
Totally.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's a whole topic for another day, but
sure.
I just want to bring it out there because of the social norms. And like you said, the lack of warning labels. And it starts early. And that's where we kind of want to dive in and talk a little bit about teenagers. And I know you said, you started in high school, which is very common. I drank in high school as well. And we all have teenagers. And so how do you, Marnie and I are just curious how you talk to your 2 kids about alcohol use. And just thoughts you have on this space.
Oh, yes. So, with teenagers, anytime you forbid or tell them no, they want to experience it. They want it more. And if they've seen you as an adult, going for your 5 o'clock happy hour drink, it's so ingrained, they don't even notice it. But you are telling them, and, Stephanie, you were talking about sporting events where parents are drinking. It is around our children all the time. They grow up with it. They think it's a rite of passage, and I've looked to European models where it's a little bit more open. You can have a drink, and they have a different relationship, I think, in Europe than we do maybe as Americans, because it's like, absolutely not. And so it's, I've been talking with my kids as much as they were able to kind of understand. 10 years ago, they were 7 and 9. And there's only so much they can probably comprehend at that point. But as, things have moved along, I've been fully open to conversations and know that they're going to experiment. They're going to be in environments and, towing that line of just being like, making sure they understand the science behind it, what's happening in their brain. And I've even said, if you could just like hold off experimenting until you're in your 20s, that would be great, because starting at such a young age really does impact your brain health and it leads you down a path. I mean, alcohol is a gateway drug. So if you're doing that in high school and you get to college, it just, it builds on all that. And there's so much change in the formation, as teens of who they are. And if you have alcohol wrapped up in that, not good. Of course, it leads to all of their problems. So I've tried to just bring them along, and I've brought them to events through Dissonance, which is the organization that's focused on mental health and recovery in and through the arts. And I've brought them to events where adults aren't drinking. They're having a good time. We had a New Year's Eve party at the Parkway Theater years ago. And I mean, it was all non-alcoholic, amazing beverages, kind of a throwback to the 20s. And they were there for that. And I got up on stage and I talked about the importance of, especially on triggering holidays like New Year's Eve and, all these things that are wrapped up in our celebrations. And it was, it's modeling that for them too, to see that they do have a different option. So long answer, but I mean, there's so much in that space for our kids. And I think, even now, like the timing seems very right to start providing those type of spaces for them.
And I agree. I think modeling is so key because if they see you drinking every night, you can't go to your kid's baseball game because you don't have an opportunity to drink, like that's kind of sad for them, right? Like as a parent, we should be able to attend their functions and not need alcohol to get through it, to have a good time.
Yeah.
I mean, amen. Yeah.
Amen. Right. Yeah. And I'll just say to that, we talked about earlier, women and drinking. So the mommy wine culture and all of that. And, women during the pandemic with younger kids at home, just my heart goes out to them. I mean, I just they've been marketed to, they've been, told that, and then the kids are hearing this, right, as they're growing up too, like, I can deal with you if I've got a glass of wine and my tumbler that's a fancy design and hidden. I mean, the secrecy of it, but also the silently kind of encouraged and on social media blatantly.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen so many videos that are supposed to be funny, like celebrities, all kinds of videos like that. Yeah. So, I know you've mentioned a lot of different ways that you have had a non-alcoholic life. I'm wondering what kind of suggestions you would give to our listeners as maybe 1 to 2 simple ways that someone could explore what a sober lifestyle would look like. What would you suggest would be like a first step?
Yeah, I think, testing out, if you are in the curious space, testing out some really quality non-alcoholic beverages. You could do that at home. Another larger extension of that is thinking about, what things are you going to, or what, how you bring alcohol where you go, right? I mean, I actually had to bring a case of non-alcoholic wine into a gala because their only options were sparkling water and soda. So could you be that person who, looks at an upcoming thing you're doing and brings something that is, not alcoholic, but very celebratory into that space? Could you do that? Those are the type of things that I really encourage. And I think that can make a huge difference because it is such a group thing. Like drinking is such a group thing. Like if, even prior to, if you're meeting friends, to be able to say, hey, let's make this like a non-alcoholic night. What do you think about that? And you can't just like spring it on them at dinner. You have to be like, we're all in it. We're all going to, do something healthy and then roll it into, a non-alcoholic experience and see like how the conversation flows. And I would say, these experiences can be very awkward. And I'd encourage everyone to like sit with that uncomfortableness and keep trying it in small doses, and talking about it. Right. 'Cause I mean, I have known, people that have been in active addiction that have moved into these spaces and just like shut down because it's such a uncomfortable, dramatic thing. But that's where, the answers are around, are we, using alcohol in a way that, we want? Is it harmful to me? And that's where we get the conversation going. And, talking with friends on an experience like that, I think would be very revealing.
I think that's such a great idea. And even, I'm just thinking back to a few situations that I've been in where where alcohol hasn't been the, dominant force, if you will, part of the night. It hasn't been the focus of the night. Mm-hmm. And you can really have some really deep, powerful conversations when everyone, like you said, is sort of on the same wavelength and isn't, their mind isn't being altered by this substance, right? And so you can really go deep in those conversations too. You can. There's something powerful about that. Yeah,
absolutely. And it does make a difference, like we were saying, when everyone's kind of in that space. Because I have found that I will want to leave spaces where there's a lot of that going on. I'm like, it's not healthy for me. So I'm just like exit. And for a lot of reasons, I don't do as many events as I've done in the past, but.
Well, I would love to do another sauna event with you. When you mentioned sauna, I remember we did that event at the Hewing Hotel.
Yes.
And it was amazing. I think it was like the summer before, like 2019 maybe. And then we had COVID, and I know they're doing them again. So I would love to join you for another one.
Yeah, sauna is back, and the correlation, like the health benefits of that too are so amazing. So like just that's what I want to do more of, like creating experiences that are healthy, but then also have like a social component to them, and really having some amazing makers, locally that are doing some amazing things with cocktails. Like and not just to replace the alcoholic version, but actually like working with grapefruit, turmeric, like all these health
Mm.
related ingredients, and
Mhm.
like ritual proof, their tequila, 0 calories. I'm still like baffled. I'm like, I have to look at that label again,
I want to check it out, actually. I'm
Yeah.
interested
Yeah.
I might have to try that.
Super
Yeah,
excited.
for
I
sure.
found a couple little fun sparkling beverages that you can find like at the co-op, and now I can't remember the name, but they're good and they're low cal and they're low sugar and they're
Yeah.
just a little more I've brought them with me places.
Yeah. And there's,
So, yeah.
botanicals. I mean, the market is
Yeah.
just exploding, and everyone has an amazing story, whether they came to it through sobriety, or many people, for the science of it. Like, hey, we can do this. This is
Yeah.
possible. And the other thing I'll say is just in terms of price points, people are paying for these things. They're not, it's not like I go to get a case of NA beer and it's maybe $12. And I'm like, I'll have a beer, it's just relatively speaking on how much I spent on drinking, and maybe buying cheap wine because I was buying a lot of it. Now I'm totally down with that. I'm like, sweet, $12,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not a problem. And people will pay for that experience, for sure. And I think restaurants, that's a whole area where I'm working with a group called Zero Proof Collective, which I think I started it. Well, with a group of 3 women last month. We were like, we need to bring together everyone that has a voice in this movement and is trying to do something related to a business initiative that's trying to move these conversations forward. So we have our first meeting today, and it's intended to be a cross section of makers and media and everyone, so we can start to really move this message into the environment space, that it really hasn't had a lot of traction in, including
So,
workplace.
and we
Mhm.
had an episode. We put you in touch with her, right? Was it Natalie?
Oh,
Natalie
We'll have to get
Holt.
that. Natalie
Yes.
Holt.
Natalie
Yes.
Holt.
So, and
Yes.
she was an amazing maker of zero proof.
Absolutely. And
drinks.
the Denver market is one that we've looked to, as Minneapolis, and then we're looking, Awake Denver is franchising nationally. They have amazing statistics on where this market is going, because finally the public is kind of coming along to say, yeah, we don't really want this. We don't want 2-for-1 happy hours. We don't want,
Yeah.
what are we putting into our bodies? I mean, alcohol is ethanol, even if it's clean, it's
Right.
ethanol. Yeah.
It's still toxins. It's still a
Yeah.
toxin. Yep. And your liver has to process it. So
Yeah, right. And the older you get, right, as you age, you're just like, can't.
Exactly. So Jen, where can people find you? You've shared so much about your various businesses and what you're doing, even just this meeting today. So where can people learn more?
Yeah, just on my website. So jengilhoi.com, JENGILHOI.com. And that is the central hub of where I am sharing stories. I'm writing about non-alcoholic event experiences, and that is going to be where I'm really focusing my work. So that would be great. Also on Instagram, my handle is Jen Gilhoy, and I'll be sharing a lot of content there as well, probably transitioning to a more sober branded account at some point. TBD. But yeah, that's what I love about this. It just keeps evolving. When I put myself out there in August of last year, I knew things would move forward. I just had no vision of how, and it has really revealed itself. So that feels very, as we say in our community, it just feels like the time is absolutely now. Like I have this anxious feeling of like, we have to get out here. And, the recovery community in Minnesota is one of the best in the country. We have Hazleton, we just have all of these amazing recovery groups, but then, also if you look at health and wellness, like the number of people who care about that and belong to gyms. And we have Fortune 500 companies who can, actually make an impact in their culture by not having alcohol in the workplace. Like, we could do it here in Minnesota, the Minnesota model.
That's so great to hear. I really love hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we start to wrap up this conversation, one thing that we like to ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
Yeah, the art of living well. Oh, and I've listened to so many of your guests answer this question. I love it. For me, it really does mean living free of alcohol. I mean, that is my baseline for every piece of wellness in my life. It has, the sobriety journey has taught me so many things that I've applied to entrepreneurship, to growth, to, anything I set my mind to. I go back to the experience of needing to be open and giving myself grace and moving into that space of wellness. So that's what it means to me.
Well, that's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing. This is such an important conversation. And we're just really happy that you came on and we're vulnerable. And I know our listeners are going to take a lot away from this. And I think, like you said, I love that term sober curious, because I think there are a lot of people out there that could identify themselves that way. So,
and you might move along the spectrum and all the way to that sober necessary piece where you determine that, it's really necessary, or some people have even just, I don't need it. I really don't need it and don't want it in my life. I could probably do it, but that's what we're seeing with Dry January and other people who come into these experiences, that they are finding that it really does me no good. Like, I just, so I love seeing that.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what you do moving forward with all of this, because I love that you're shaping, at least in Minneapolis, and we'll see how far it goes.
Yeah.
The new, because it is a very new, it's new what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's progressive, it's grassroots, and you're clearly seeing more demand for it.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things coming together at this particular moment in time. So yeah, it's exciting.
Well, thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you
Jen.
both. Yes, yeah. I am so grateful for both of you.
Yes. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Art of Living Well podcast. We are so grateful that you joined us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or anyone else you think may benefit from this information. We'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and tag the Art of Living Well podcast on social media.
If you want more inspiration in between episodes, you can find us on social media at theartofliving_well on Instagram and Facebook, where we will share snippets from our daily lives and our journey to living well.